Origins of a Gathering City Part 3, The Blue and Gray Reunion at Wilson's Creek. By August of 1883, something had changed in Springfield. Just a few years earlier, the city had hosted a press convention. That was about 150 editors. It was organized, it was important, but it was controlled. This was different. Now the trains coming into Springfield weren't carrying professionals or delegates. They were carrying veterans of the Civil War, and not just from nearby towns. These men were coming in through a growing rail network that now connected the Ozarks to the rest of the country. Over several days, they arrived in steady waves, stepping off at the depot, greeted by cannon fire, bells, and organized receptions. From there, the movement didn't stop. Processions formed through the streets. Wagons lined up, carriages filled, and then everything started moving southwest, about 10 miles out toward Wilson's Creek. Some rode, some walked. All of them followed the same path, the wire road, the same road that had carried troops during the war. Only now, instead of marching toward conflict, they were moving toward something else entirely. By the time it settled, thousands had come through. Some estimates put it near 10,000 people over the course of the reunion. And for Springfield, that number mattered because this wasn't just about memory. This was about scale. By 1883, Springfield had grown. It had hotels, it had boarding houses, it had the beginnings of infrastructure that could support visitors. But this reunion pushed everything. Hotels filled up fast, boarding houses reached capacity, families opened their homes, and when that still wasn't enough, people spilled out into temporary setups across the city and the surrounding land. Transportation didn't stop moving. Wagons and carriages ran constantly between Springfield and Wilson's Creek, back and forth, carrying people, supplies, anything needed to keep the thing going. And then there was food. On the second day, they built a massive tent on the grounds of E.G. Blake. Inside, they laid out plates for over 600 people at once. 600 in one sitting. That wasn't casual. That was coordination. That was a system being stretched in real time. Springfield wasn't just hosting anymore, it was managing pressure. The reunion itself lasted 3 days, August 8th through the 10th, and it was structured in a way that mattered. It started in the city, social, civic, organized, and then it moved outward, toward the battlefield. Veterans from both Union and Confederate sides were invited to return, to walk the same ground where they had fought 22 years earlier. And what made this different was that they weren't separated. They camped together, they sat together, they talked, as if, at least for a moment, there had never been a line between them. The first day was about arrival, registration, gathering, organization. Inside places like Drummond Hall, tables were set up, flags decorated the space, and something simple happened that carried weight. There were shared provisions, tobacco, pipes. Men sat down together and smoked, and that doesn't sound like much, but when you think about what that meant, former enemies sitting side by side, doing something ordinary, that was part of the reunion, that was part of the shift. The second day moved outward into the city. Processions filled the streets. Hundreds of veterans marched with bands playing, flags hanging from buildings, the city fully aware of what it was hosting. And then everything led back to that central moment, the meal. 600 plates under one tent. Not just feeding people, showing what it took to hold something this big together. And then came the third day, August 10th, the anniversary of the battle. That's when everything moved to Wilson's Creek. Thousands of people made the trip, wagons, carriages, people on foot, all moving along the wire road again, dust rising, constant motion, no real pause. When they got there, the focus centered on Bloody Hill. A speaking stand had been built near where General Nathaniel Lyon had fallen in 1861, and now instead of lines of fire there were speeches, gatherings, observers. Among them was Ulysses S. Grant. So now you've got former soldiers, civilians, national figures, all standing on the same ground where the battle actually happened. And the land hadn't changed much. That part is important. The hills were still there. The creek still ran. The same scrub oak covered the terrain, so when these veterans walked the field, they weren't imagining it. They were stepping back into it. The reunion expanded into something bigger than just a gathering. It became a temporary city, a 2-mile stretch of encampment. Sibley tents lined across the land, families moving through, vendors setting up refreshment stands, people eating, talking, walking, remembering. And right at the center of it all, Bloody Hill, near Lyon's death site, a stone cairn had started to form, visitors adding to it over time, piece by piece. Veterans moved across the battlefield, identifying where they had stood. Some followed routes tied to specific units, others just stood in place, looking at ground that hadn't moved, even if everything else had. Back in 1861, about 5,800 Union troops had faced nearly 12,000 Confederate forces. Now those same sides were sharing space, and that's where the real shift was. Observers at the time noticed it. The interaction stayed calm, orderly. Men who had once faced each other in combat were now sitting together, eating together, standing in the same places without conflict. At spots like the Lion Cairn, both sides gathered, same location, different memories, same ground. But while all of that was happening, Springfield was still being tested. Housing was stretched, roads were crowded, food systems had to expand beyond anything permanent. Water, sanitation, all of it had to adapt on the fly. And still, it held, not perfectly, but it held. And that's really what this reunion showed. It wasn't just about reconciliation. It wasn't just about memory. It was proof of capacity. Springfield had moved from hosting something small and controlled to managing something large, moving, and unpredictable. And it worked, because after this, things didn't stay the same. The battlefield didn't stay just a battlefield. It started becoming a destination, a place people returned to, a place that would eventually be preserved, remembered, and recognized at a much larger level. And Springfield, it kept growing into that role, because everybody can point to the moment something comes together. But this was one of those moments where the city had to carry it, and you can see it in the numbers, the movement, the strain. What looks like a gathering on the surface was something the city had to hold underneath.